السماوات والأرض رب العالمين وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم الحمد لله الذي نعمته تتم الصالحات ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا صلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيد الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ملك الحق المبين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمين على وحيه يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have and malikum min ni'matin fa min Allah. And we come on this last day of Friday to remind ourselves and each other of our duties and obligations and our pledge and commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a pledge and a covenant with Allah that we need to honor. We must honor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it عهد الميثاق الذين يوفون بعهد الله ولا ينقضون الميثاق. Those who honor their covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also to remind ourselves and remind each other of the countless bounties and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تعالى نعم الله لا تحصوها. اللهم أتم علينا نعمك التي لا تحصى ولا تعد وأوزعنا شكرها. اللهم آمين. We respected brothers and sisters in Islam, we're going to continue the series that we started a while ago, which is addressing three questions basically. And we'll start with a very quick summary and then we'll build on it, inshallah. One is why things are not changing. Why Muslim situation is not changing. You go to any Muslim country after years and you don't see much has changed. Why is that? Number two, why the attempts to change failed. We have some serious attempts. People made a lot of sacrifice, worked so hard for years, and then they achieved the goal, but things did not change. And we mentioned some examples. Liberation movement against occupation, the Islamic movement to bring people back to Islam, and recently the Arab Spring to remove or topple dictatorship. All three attempts achieved their goals, but yet things did not change. We talked about the right approach. There is an approach to change things. You follow it, you get the results. You don't follow it, you're not going to get the results. And before even we talk about the approach, there is a golden rule that we all know in Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change the conditions of people, so forget about it. It's not going to happen until those people themselves, they change. And we have been trying to change our conditions without ourselves changing. So we were to short circuit or shortcut, and that's why it never worked. And there is another rule in sociology that says you can never change situation with the same mindset that has created it. So you have a way of thinking that produced certain conditions. And then you go with the same way of thinking, you're going to try to fix it. It's not going to work. You cannot fix the condition or change with the same mindset. So briefly, approach very clear, proper diagnosis, proper reading of history, like any good physician would do, clear vision and inspiring vision, effective strategy and roadmap to get there, and then of course, diligent execution. And while you execute, you need to be document and assess, reassess, and be willing to change course, to make adjustment. Don't say, I'm going to continue even though it's not working. There is something called cut your losses. You find yourself in the wrong track, it's not leading where you just stop and make course correction or change course. And violating one of these is enough for you not to get the results. And I say that we have deficiency in all of them, unfortunately. And then, especially the first two, our assessment of our reality is very superficial. We don't go to the root causes. We focus only on the symptoms. And our narration of history is very wrong. A lot of us consider that our history was all rosy and we have been in great shape until the collapse of the Ottoman state, and that's not true at all. And if you accept that, then you're not going to be solving the problem, because then your diagnosis is going to be wrong or superficial, and then the solution will be superficial, and you're going to continue to be in that vicious cycle. We propose a different narration of history, which I believe makes much more sense. That Muslims, at certain point in time, specifically during the tenure of Umar ibn Khattab, have seen an explosive growth in which, in the span of a couple of months, they absorbed two superpowers, two great big empires, the Roman Empire and the Persian, in span of a couple of months, and that there was no capacity to handle that. There was no administrative capacity, there is no integration capacity. It's like a population of 100,000 and receive like 10 million refugees. Where are you going to put them? How are you going to accommodate them? You don't have the infrastructure for that. So we have that mismatch, which was covered to some extent, to great extent, with this exceptional personality of Umar ibn Khattab. Umar ibn Khattab died, things start to surface. And things we get into chaos, growing chaos, and then led to a civil war, bloody civil war, which led to the dynasty rule, Hukm al-Salatin, which led to stopping ijtihad and freezing Islam and reducing it to just rituals and personal fiqh, removing the sense of mission, removing the maqasid, removing everything. And then we ended up with about 12th century in that situation. This has caused tremendous damage. One, to our understanding of Islam. So the Islam that we inherited has gone through that tunnel and that was mutilated, was reduced, was big damage happened to it. And then there was a big damage that happens to our minds, because Islam was frozen in time and our minds were frozen in time. And we stopped thinking long time ago. We stopped thinking and we were told not to think. And nowadays, as I mentioned, you want to study the Quran, they will tell you you cannot do it. You don't have the capacity to do it. Okay, you want to study the Hadith, say no, you can't. You want to study even the books of fiqh or Torah, they will tell you no. The Shaykh should read it for you, not you. So these minds are crippled and frozen, and have been frozen for so long. So, and all the attempts, now we understand why those attempts of change did not work, because none of those attempts addressed that damage. None of those attempts tried to come back to the original Islam, very inspiring, very empowering Islam. None of those attempts tried to fix the damage that happened to the Muslim mind and Muslim personality. They dealt with the symptoms and with the tip of the iceberg. That's basically summarizing everything that we have been covering for a few weeks now. Last time I asked a question about comparison between ourselves and the West and Europe. Now Europe inherited very similar situation. They had the monarchy and they had the church crippling, suppressing any creativity or any scientific endeavor, etc. So much worse. I mean, our situation was much, much better. With all those deficiencies, when you go to the 16th, 17th centuries, we were way ahead. So we have our own problems and deficiency. Our societies were weakening, but still we were in much better shape. But inherited similar situation, but dealt with it very differently. While we said that everything was great, and that system is an Islamic system that we want to bring back, and the Islam that we inherited is great, let's stick to it, the West did exactly the opposite. They revolted against that monarchy, that absolute power. Why? Why you have absolute power and check power? And they revolted against the church that was basically suppressing the thinking and creativity, etc. They were able to free their minds. They were able to liberate their minds. They started thinking critically. They did something that Islam encourages us to do all the time, which is to scrutinize ideas, not taking anything for granted. And I will mention examples how Islam praises and encourages those who contemplate, those who ask questions, those who reflect, those who say why and why not, and condemns those who follow blindly. Rasul says, لا يكن أحدكم إمعا. You should not follow blindly. Wherever you go with the flow, you should not do that. And then Quran tells us about the people who ended up in hellfire. كنا نخوض مع الخائضين. We were just going with the flow. That's something that is not, again, it is condemned in Islam. And there are so many examples where Quran praises those who use their minds, those who ask questions, to the point that Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him how he brings the dead to life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, are you doubting this? أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ? Ibrahim alayhi salam said, no, but I want to be more certain. بَلَى وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. That's with Allah. Not with a prophet, not with an individual, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibrahim asked, show me how you bring the dead back to life. قال ربي أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال ولم تؤمن. You still have any doubts? Said, no, but I just want to be more sure, more certain. And there are so many examples. So, political system much worse in the West, but they revolted against it, and the religious thing was very bad, very bad. People who give those checks of forgiveness, sukuk al-ghufran, and the clergy will impose anything on you, will oppose any scientific endeavor, and it was much more worse, no critical thinking, no creativity, nothing. But the assessment was different. And the reaction was different. Because we were under the impression that everything was good, so we wanted to go back to that situation. Why? Because we thought that system was an Islamic system, and we want to bring it back. And our situation was fine until the last minute of the last day. So the solution was, well, let's bring our people back to the Islam that we inherited, which was severely damaged and mutilated and beyond repair, and let us bring back that political Islam. We call it Khilafah. You can call it whatever you want. At the end of the day, what is it? It is one individual who has absolute and checked power that is passed on from father to son. That's what it is. I mean, you can call him Amir al-Mu'mineen, you can call him Khalifa, you can call him whatever you want. But that system is called dynasty rule, Hukm Salatin, or Hukm al-A'ila. It's a family that is ruling and has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing. Because in Islam, people are ruled by their consent. That's what we have seen in Khulafa al-Rashidin. Nobody opposed himself because I'm from this tribe or from this family. And some groups are trying until now to bring back that system. Until now, there are some Islamic groups through it. And the masses, even the Muslim, average Muslims, if you tell them what is the Islamic political system, they will tell you that system because they see it on those series on TV and they think that's the ideal system and we need to return to it, and that's not true. The West, on the other hand, revolted against monarchy and against the clergy. Say you cannot impose anything. They put everything on the table for scrutiny. Why and why not? The key difference between our reaction and their reaction was liberating their minds and from religious and political shackles. There was some political shackles, crippling minds and hands, and religious. They liberated themselves from all. And subhanAllah, Quran tells us that's the job of the Prophet. The prophets, they come to free people. يَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. The Prophet comes to free people from the shackles that were holding them back or holding them down. يَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-A'raf says about the Prophet, what does he do? يَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ, the burden that is preventing them from progressing, and the shackles. يَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. So they liberated their minds from religious and political shackles. They put a lot of inherited, listen carefully to this. They inherited like ourselves. They inherited a lot of ideas and thoughts and concepts they took for granted. They put those on the table for scrutiny. That's what we should be doing nowadays. We inherited a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of concepts that we are taken for granted. It is about time to scrutinize those and put them on the table for the scrutinies. Their minds became free and critical. We are going nowhere without our minds becoming free and critical. Without our minds start thinking freely and expressing ourselves freely, and then become critical. Don't take anything for granted from anybody. Ask the question, why? What's your evidence? Convince me. And let us raise a generation who think this way. Even in dealing with your children, convince them. Train them to do the following. Train them to ask questions. Don't be offended when they say why or why not. Don't be offended, explain. And then train them also to express themselves freely. If you start making a lot of taboos, a lot of things that you should not discuss, you should not ask, you should not say, you cripple the mind of your children, and you're going to continue this idea of self-censorship, that we censor ourselves. So minds should become free and critical. And that's what we are yet to do. Free and critical minds that put everything to the scrutiny. Free and critical minds that put everything to the scrutiny. Both the Hadith and the Quran encourage contemplation, encourage reflection, encourage and condemns the behavior of going with the flow, as I mentioned, following blindly or accepting things without scrutiny. And just to let you know, Quran is teaching us. The prophets, they were discussing with the people who were persecuting them and were opposing them. Yet they were having very decent conversation, full of compassion. That's a lesson for us. Nowadays, the conversation that happened between the prophets and their people, nowadays, and we're not able to do it among ourselves. Muslims. It was between prophet and mushriks, fighting them. Yet there was a conversation. Nowadays, Muslims, if we just follow different madahib, or we have different opinion about an incident, or a different fiqh opinion, we cannot even have a conversation. Because we can go quickly to the takfir or takhween, that you are this and you are that, labeling. We lost that ability to listen to something different, something new. We only want the things that makes us feel good, which they call it, this is by the way a problem. It's a psychological problem, call it confirmation bias. What's confirmation bias? Confirmation bias is when you decide to filter, accept only the information that suits you, that confirm your pre-existing opinion. You have an opinion about something, you look only for the information that confirms that. Any information that or evidence that challenge that opinion, you don't read it. That's called confirmation bias. Nowadays, it's so widespread. Look at what people see watch on TV or on social media. They watch and read only things that confirm their pre-existing opinion, and that's why they are not open for anything else. Even if it is evidence, even if it is a fact or information, they filter it out. They don't want to hear it. They want to hear what confirms their bias or their pre-existing opinion, even if it is not true. So, having that critical mind of asking again. I mentioned the example of prophets and their people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He tells us about something haram or something fard, He explains it. I mean, Allah does not have to explain it. Now, we believe everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do, it's in our best interest. Anything that is haram, it's haram. Yet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains why drinking is forbidden and gambling. فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. They cause a lot of harm. Why should we pray? إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر. So Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to His creation, yet He explains, yet He engages our minds and convinces us. More than that, Quran full of the story of conversation between Allah and Iblis. What's this for? That's a lesson for us. Allah is talking to why you didn't make sujood to Malaika, and Iblis says, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, conversation. Prophets talking to their people who are fighting them. Conversation. We have seen Allah talking to us and convincing us, telling us why this is haram, why this is halal. Allah talking to shaitan and ask why and why not, etc. Isn't this enough for us to learn, to listen to different opinion and discuss it quietly and without labeling? Nowadays, majority of Muslims are not able to do that. Majority of Muslims, when they read something, they don't focus on the text. They want to label the writers. They want to categorize, where are you? Are you with us or against us? The moment I find out that you are with us, then I'm not going to continue reading. I'm going to start praising you. MashaAllah, this is great, etc. I don't even know what you wrote. But I figure out that you are among our tribe, our people. Now, on the other hand, if while I'm reading, I came to the conclusion that you are on the other side, I'm not going to continue reading. I'll start attacking you. You're a kafir, you are a Zionist, you are a traitor, you are this, you are that. I don't exaggerate if I say majority of our people think this way. We're still in that mindset of with us or against us, and no way that we're going to consider something new or a different opinion. And with this mindset, we're going nowhere. It is about time to open our minds and listen. Rasul was listening to Mughira, who was basically insulting him. Mughira, one of the top leaders of Quraysh, came to Rasul and told him the following. If you are doing what you are doing, this da'wah thing, if you're doing this just because you want to be our king, just stop it. We'll make you our king. I mean, that's an insult. For the prophets, that's an insult. Saying you are doing this just to be... And then if you're doing this to be rich, Now we can collect money and make you the richest. That's also another insult. And worse came later. If you're doing this because you're crazy or mad, we can bring you the best of doctors to treat you. Can you imagine Rasulullah listening to all of this and did not even interrupt? Not only that, he said, أَفَرَغْتَ يَا أَبَا الْوَلِيدِ? Are you done? He said yes. And he recited verses from the Quran. So Surah Al-Safa, no cursing, no attacking, nothing, just continue. You are a prophet who has a message. After you say what you said, you deliver your message. What do we need more to learn this practice of look for the truth, not what makes you feel good, not what confirms your pre-existing opinion, and be prepared to change things that you took for granted. Always look for what is the best. You have a good idea, you found a better one. Just throw it away and accept it. Rasulullah says, Al-Hikmah Dalatul Mu'min. Wisdom is the lost property of a believer. Wherever he finds it, he will take it. You are always on the look for the truth, on the look for wisdom. You never think that you own it. Truth is something that we look for. It's not something that we have in hand. Quran praises Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he used his mind. Ibrahim alayhi salam, and all Quran is lessons for us. He found his people doing something that doesn't make sense. He found his people worshipping idols. He discussed with them with logic. He said, how can you worship ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم? You worship something that cannot cause you any harm or benefit you. Just use your mind. And then, how can you worship something that does not hear ما لا يسمع ولا يبصر ولا يغني عنك شيئا? To his father. How can you worship something that does not hear, does not talk, does not see, and they cannot cause you any harm? هل يسمعونكم تدعون? Those idols that you're worshiping, do they listen to you when you're making supplications and prayer? Using his mind and asking, engaging his people to use their minds. هل يسمعونكم تدعون أو ينفعونكم أو يضرون? And we mentioned the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking him to show him how you bring the dead back to life. And then Quran also tells us about Ibrahim alayhi salam looking for the truth. After rejecting this, does not make sense, he started looking for the truth. So he saw the star. He said, this must be God. فلما رأى كوكبا قال هذا ربي فلما أفل قال لا أحب الآفلين. When the star disappeared, he said, no, that cannot be. And then he saw the moon. فلما رأى القمر بازغا قال هذا ربي. This is God. And then when it disappeared, he said, لما أفل قال لئن لم يهديني ربي لأكونن من القوم الضالين. فلما رأى الشمس بازغة, when he saw the sun, قال هذا ربي هذا أكبر. فلما أفلت قال يا قوم إني بريء مما تشركون إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. Why Quran will telling us this? It's a lesson for us. That's what you should be doing all the time. Reject anything that does not make sense, even if generation after generation took it for granted, and always look for the truth. That's why Quran tells us this story. These are not stories. لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة. The stories of the prophets were mentioned in Quran for us to draw the lessons. So, back to where we are and where we go from here. Two major problems happen in our history. One is damage to our deen, and the other is damage to our minds. Without fixing the two, things are not not going to change, regardless of how many times we're going to try. A lot of damage happened to our understanding of the deen. Deen was frozen in time. Deen was mutilated. There are some essential elements of Islam were removed. There are some minor elements in Islam was blown out of proportion, very distorted. The understanding that we inherited, very distorted. That's why it's not producing anything. Even though it is embraced by hundreds of millions, it's still not producing anything. And then there is a lot of damage happening here. A lot of problems in our thinking, in our way of thinking, and then our minds have been frozen for too long. For too long, we start using our minds and we start become afraid because there are so many taboos. You can't talk about this, you cannot ask about this, you cannot express your opinion about this. So you end up with your mind crippled and shackled. It is about time to free our minds. And the two are related. Damage to the mind and the damage to the deed. Damage to the mind and damage to the deed, because this deed remains relevant and fresh and vibrant when we use our minds. When we use our minds, we keep it relevant and we keep it fresh and we keep it inspiring. So a lot of work needs to be done in the Department of Deed to rediscover the true inspiring Islam and bring that very nice, wonderful picture of Islam back to its original state. Again, we took some elements, we throw them away, and we took some marginal or small elements and we blow them out of proportion. And then a lot of work has to be done here so that we can start thinking, start having that critical mind, thinking freely. Don't allow anybody to think for you. You should be thinking for yourself. Thinking freely and thinking critically. Don't take anything for granted. Other than the very basic beliefs that these cannot, everything else should be open to scrutiny. Why and why not? What's your evidence? Convince me. And again, let's cut this by training future generations on thinking freely, thinking critically, and expressing their opinion freely. وَتُوبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه. نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. With respected brothers and sisters in Islam, I'm going to conclude and close with two things, pieces of information that sometimes we don't pay attention to them. Muslims have developed the foundations for science. All the fundamental theories in different branches of sciences were initiated by Muslims. But who had the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution? Europe. Again, Muslims are the ones who laid the foundations for different sciences, hard sciences and even social sciences. But they remain individual efforts. They never were compiled to become institutionalized and to develop. What happened is that Europe built on that scientific revolution and then industrial revolution based on those ideas. You see Muslims in optics, in math, in medicine, you name it, social sciences, etc. They were the ones who did it. That's in science. When it comes to politics, we were the ones who laid the foundation of democratic system. Because what happened in Khilafah Rashida was democracy. It was implemented. Leadership by consent, yes. Consultation, yes. Transparency, yes. Equal opportunity, yes, it's there. Accountability of leaders is there. All the essential elements of democracy were there. But what happened after that? We relapsed to dynasty rule, and after several centuries, the West came up with these ideas of social contract that was there in the document that was written by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's a social contract. That's the social contract, the constitution that the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wrote in Medina. They didn't call it social contract, but that's what it is. They didn't call it a parliament, but there was shura. There was consultation at that time. And there was equality among everybody. to the point that the Khalifa himself, nowadays we praise it when we have the president being investigated. We see that a great sign of democracy, which is true. But this is happening at that time when the Khalifa will stand in front of the judge like any other citizen. The Khalifa at that time, the ruler, will, if you have an issue with another citizen, they will stand in front of the judge like everybody else. So it was already there, but again, we relapsed, and then after several centuries, many centuries, people started developing that system that was already, the principles or the elements of it were there. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا توفنا وانت راض عنا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها وخير أيامنا يوم نلقاك. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا وجميع موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.